It would be remiss of me not to mention the Shakespeare reference, given that we're in his hometown. Is it fair to say that Shakespeare is an influence in your writing? And if not, who is?
Well, I've moved to Stratford. I've been here 5 years now. I'm hoping it will rub off at least. I'm living quite close to where Shakespeare was married, so I'm hoping at some point it might, the bard might cross over. It wasn't really, no, I wasn't brought up with that. I just love the natural rhythm of people talking. And what I like about this is because this is based on my own story. So it's not as hard hitting as the other two films, but it's more personal than the other two films, because it's about this sense that, when they say when a writer's born into the family's dead. It's an old saying. If you want to be a writer, there's a scene that the karate guy there says you have to give everything. And for me to be a writer, it cost me everything. It cost me my first marriage. It cost me. Well, I had to give everything to it. But I wanted to be a writer. I love words. I just love words. I love listening to words. I love writing words. And what I wanted to try and convey in this, I don't know if I got it or not, but I wanted to try and convey the fact that my first wife is a good girl. I've got 4 great kids with her. She ripped up my first piece of work and threw it in the bin. And if I'd have known how scared she was, I thought she was just arrogant. She just said, it's rubbish, it's shit, it's in the bin with all the other rubbish. And I literally fell out of love with her that minute. My marriage died that minute. But if I'd have known how scared she was, if I'd have understood how afraid she was of my massive potential, my massive drive to write, to capture something, to capture this, I call it the strong force, but to capture this essence, this love. If I'd have known she was so afraid, I would have been so much kinder. I wasn't kind, I was just a big ego. I was so sensitive about writing. If anybody said anything negative about it at all, it killed me. But for someone to rip it up and throw it in the bin, I just thought it, ended my marriage. My marriage essentially ended then. I made lots of other mistakes. If I'd have been around at the time of Moses, there would have been a 13th commandment with my name on it. Believe me, I'm not innocent. But that ended my marriage because I was so passionate about writing. So I wanted to write that. And after that had happened, this marriage I was in went in all sorts of wrong places. And I did lots of wrong things. I committed all of the crimes you should never commit in a marriage. And I can remember when we split up and I'd met somebody else, and my first wife didn't know about it at the time. And I can remember I was on my last nerve. My nerves were in the wind. I remember I was a delivery driver at the time and still working the doors. And I remember stopping at a phone box in the middle of nowhere to ring my ex-wife up. But I couldn't speak because I was just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And she just kept saying, come home, come home, come home. But there was no home. I could never go back. And I hurt her. I hurt her so much. But I couldn't, and I wouldn't change anything. For me, it was just a matter of I had to write. It was in me. It was always in me. But it was so threatening to my wife. It was so threatening to my peers. It was so threatening to everybody around me. If you wanted to write, you were pretentious. And you couldn't, a working class kid, as I was at the time, a working class kid, the worst thing you can accuse him of is being pretentious, of getting above his station. I don't even know what the station is, but apparently I was getting above it. And it was very threatening to everybody. So I had to be, if I wanted to write, I had to be prepared to lose everything, which I did really. I lost everything, but gained a lot more. And ironically, the girl who, it's kind of a sliding doors moment, that is, of how things could have been, because I really wanted my first wife to get involved. I wanted it to train with me. I wanted her to love the writing, but it was too threatening for her. And I met this other girl, and I gave it to her, and I said to her, I want to be a writer. And she read it, and she said, you already are a writer. And I loved her on the spot, and I never stopped loving her, and I'm married to her now. I never ever stopped loving her just because she said you already are a writer. I was so insecure, so unsure about what I was doing. So that's what I wanted to try and capture in that. Not just that someone did me bad. No one did me bad. You know, I wanted to write and that's it. But that, if I'd have known how afraid my first wife was, I would have been kinder, I'd have been gentle, I'd been more patient. I didn't know she was so afraid. I only realised that later on when I was around other people whose ambitions were even bigger than mine, and I thought, God, this must be how she felt. And I can't change that, but I can honour the work, and I can write beautifully and write honestly and bring everything I can to the page. That's what I continue to try to do.
Tribute to her.
Yeah, thank you. I was hoping it would be.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be able to capture that moment where there's a moment where you've left and you can't go back because it's not there anymore. You know, what's that famous Oasis song? I took a walk with my fame down memory lane, but I could never find my way back. So I knew I'd done a lot of bad things, but I just couldn't get back, and it was just painful. And I said to Michael, I want to capture that. He wanted me to write a film for Luke, and I wasn't sure. And I just looked at Luke's, because he's a really good actor, but I looked at his show reel, and I just wasn't sure. I wasn't seeing anything different. Then suddenly, boom, he just came out with this monologue in the middle of his show reel, and I loved it. I loved the way he delivered it. So I thought, oh, I could write a film based around that and try and capture the stuff.
I mean, you have raw talent. You don't really need the influences, but I guess philosophy and culture, you draw from everything, don't you?
The esoteric, the exoteric, the mesoteric, you know, philosophy. I've read a lot of Shakespeare. I love Beckett. When I was working in London in the theatre, I started at the Royal Court. I sent the play Michael was talking about, One Sock. I sent it to the Royal Court, and they took me into their writers group. And everybody I worked with in London would mention a different writer, and I would read everything they've done, everything they've got. I didn't want to alter my own voice, and I never wanted to go on courses specifically. I didn't want to affect that, but I was really influenced by these, you know, these great writers. What was the girl's name, Michael, who did the play that Joe was in? Sarah Kane. I was introduced to Sarah Kane's writing, and I thought, I'm a brave writer. Then when I read her, I thought, God, that's brave. She is such a brave writer. It's one of my great regrets that I never got to meet her. I was so inspired by her. There's loads of people. Beckett I loved, you know. So there's loads of people I was really inspired by. Paul Abbott, he mentored me for a little bit. And Jimmy McGovern I really loved as well. But I just I didn't want to affect, whatever it was I got, I didn't want to affect it. I just wanted to be around people that helped to flush it out and shape it, which Michael's been, even with Bardo, he had to kick and push me to bring more out, because I just wanted to write a little bit and then step away, because it was so personal. Yeah. And he was very patient and, you know, helped me to get more out.
You weren't aware of the fear, how afraid people were at the time.
No.
And that's the thing that I really latched onto, I think, as a concept. And I think that's really at the core of the film that we've made. So, you know, the core idea in it is things could have been different for these people. And, you know, she talks about wanting to be a teacher, and then Anne-Marie is a teacher. It's, you know, that's what could have been. So there's these parallel lives going on, and both characters are played by Sarah.
I didn't realise the first time I saw it that it was the same actress. It dawned on me watching it again tonight that it was the same actress. I think it's an incredible performance. My final question is about, you know, we talk about what could have been, what has been. You're all BAFTA winners. That's never going to change. But I'm just curious how this accolade has affected your careers over the last 20 years. Natasha, I know you've sort of moved on to something different. Do you want to talk about where you are in your life now?
Very shortly after we won the BAFTA, met somebody who went on to become my husband, and then I had a baby, sort of in my mid-40s, basically. And after 4 or 5 years, I thought it's just too hard being an independent filmmaker and bringing up a child, and I need a kind of, grown-up job. So I realised that I'd always been interested in storytelling. So I think I mentioned I worked in theatre, then television, then film. And luckily for me, there's a fantastic national charity that's been around for nearly 60 years called Avon. And it's basically one of the UK's, we bill ourselves as we would, the UK's leading creative writing charity. And so we run residential creative writing courses, some of which are in filmmaking. So I'm particularly passionate about script writing and theatre, and we run those for the public, but also for schools groups, for vulnerable adults, looked after children, refugees. So that's kind of essentially what I've been doing for 12 years, and it's a real privilege, and I get to work with lots of writers from all different genres. But it is amazing, because of course I did have this whole life before that, working with Michael, making lots of documentaries, then with Michael and Geoff making these films, which I haven't seen for years. People were always, I don't jump up and down and talk about BAFTA. I just think, we were it was a moment in time, we were very lucky. It was, a lot of amazing people coming together and working together. It's always a collaboration, filmmaking. And people have always been wowed by it, which, sometimes you sort of think, yeah, that is amazing. But a lot of the time, I just sort of think, it could have been so many other filmmakers. There's amazing films out there that no one gets to see, people aren't being rewarded, So, I think there was a moment where we thought, we tried to get funding for a feature film we worked on together, came really close, but again, it wasn't the kind of thing I could remortgage my house for, because it was going to cost probably at least several £100,000. So I think, that was tough. We spent 6 years trying to get that off the ground. And interestingly, I feel today it might have been a bit different. I think Geoff and Michael were both fairly ahead of the curve in writing about masculinity in a way that perhaps now people are exploring a lot more. It was a great privilege. It was a really extraordinary time. But I feel also really lucky to do what I do today, which gives me a huge amount of fulfillment, and I hope makes a real difference to lots of writers' lives.
It was strange winning BAFTAs and then meeting a lot of film industry people as a result. Everybody wants to meet you, and it's a quite a confusing experience. And I didn't really sort of understand what was happening at the time until I realised, perhaps too late, that actually a lot of people in the industry, it's like their job to meet you. Their job is, they're not the people making the decisions necessarily. So they'll be, one of the juniors in a production company, for example, and you're sort of going along to these meetings and thinking, this is a foot in the door, we're going to develop stuff and everything. And then, after a while, I kind of realized, well, it's not moving forwards. And it seems like it's just somebody's job to sort of tick the box. Oh, I've met that BAFTA winner. Yeah, they've been through the door. Yeah, we've seen them. And they've done their job, kind of thing. So it's a very, if you don't really understand it, it's very confusing. I did hear an interview with Peter Capaldi recently, and he won an Oscar for a short film as a director. And he said some really interesting things about it that are really related to. And he said, it's just that he was a kid from Glasgow. He didn't come from a background where you sort of had your business plan and your portfolio ready to go. So like you've won your short film Oscar and you're kind of like, well, here's my plan for the feature films going forward, blah, blah, blah. And you've got a network of people that you can connect with and make that happen. And I kind of thought, yeah, that's a bit how it was really. So it happened very quickly, wasn't quite ready to take advantage of that. I am now, if there's still time.
Of course there is.
Always time.
I don't get involved in any of the politics. I just think if you've got a story and it's got a heart, it will get made. You know, and that's most of my films have been made by patrons, people who like me or who like my work and fund it. I'm not that bothered about making money from film. I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I'll do whatever I can to make a living just so that I can tell stories. I do books and plays and films, but I've just reduced my footprint so it's so small that I don't really have to make much money, and I can just write. I only want to write. I just want to honour the word. So, but I never get involved in the politicking. When we did BAFTA and Brown Paper BAFTA, we didn't know any of that. And it wasn't luck that got it through. It got through because it had something to say, and it was bound together by love. Everybody loved the projects. So I just, you know, whenever I need the money for a film, I do mostly short films because I want the restriction of trying to get a story and a truth into something small. The last one I did last year was 8 minutes with Chris Eccleston. It's an animation. Never done animation before, but it's so, I love it. It's so beautiful, and it's only 8 minutes long. The animation, Chris is acting, and you know, the money from that came from one patron who gave me the money to be able to do it. So I just, if my heart is behind the story, then the money will come. It will appear. I know that people need to make a living, but I always say to people, if you have to do stuff to, you know, to facilitate your art until your art can facilitate you, do it. You know, I'll do anything. I'll you know, I'll mix cement. I'll do anything I can to facilitate the art. All I'm interested in is the words, and because of that, that's why I've, like I said, I've reduced my footprint so I can just write. So I only just need enough for my coffee, and even that gets supplied for me. If you're in the right frame, it's like, and I don't mean this to sound new age, but if you're in the right place and if you've got the right heart, you've got the right belief, you will be facilitated. Everything you need will turn up. We bumped into that accidentally. Our filmmaking was a happy accident. Just this new voice and this desire to tell stories, because stories transform lives. They change lives. You know, there's no doubt about that. They save lives, especially if they contain truth. If you're trying to contrive something, it won't work. But if you're brave enough to just tell the truth, it is transformative. So I just try to get rid of every bit of politicking and just do that. When we were first BAFTA nominated, I didn't even know what a BAFTA was. But it's certainly, you know, that voice in your head that says you haven't got it, you're not good enough, you know, you're a piece of shit. You get a BAFTA, that voice goes. It daren't even raise its head because you have proof in your head. It's been validated. Now, I don't want to look for validation anymore. As Brian said, you know, the words themselves should be the validation. So, but it really helped me. It opened something up in me, and it's, you know, and I still take the BAFTA talks and I let people hold it because it's weighty, and I just say, see that, I used to hold that in my stomach, all that pain, all that chaos from my brother's death is now in this beautiful statue, and this opens doors, gets me into prisons to talk to prisoners, it gets me into hospitals to talk to staff, it gets me all sorts of places. So it's a key, and it's a massive responsibility, but I think just find the truth and everything else will come.
And I think that's fantastic, but I also believe that it is a question of politics, and I believe that we have to do what we can as storytellers, artists, filmmakers, people working in the creative industries to continue to lobby and advocate and work really hard to support artists, filmmakers, writers. It's not easy, as I've said several times, to choose to work in the creative industries, but I think for those of us who do it, if we feel like we have to do it, that's just kind of, you know, where we've come from, either because we want to tell the truth or because we think it's really important to communicate stories. that's how we identify who we are. And I think this film festival is Arts Council funded, Argon's Arts Council funded. I think it absolutely is about everything Geoff says, but also lobbying and putting pressure on governments and funders to kind of continue to support the arts and understand how important the arts are for us to tell our stories as people.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But I think as an artist, I do agree with that. But as an artist, just do the work. Because if you allow yourself to think it's not happening because I'm working class, it's not happening because of my colour, my creed, or whatever it is, you're never going to do anything. Just do the work and make it beautiful, make it so outstanding that people will be embarrassed not to do the work. It creates a centrifugal force that draws in what you need, and it creates a centripetal force to kick away everything you don't need. It's all about the work. You know, my lane is just as a creative, so I couldn't say to someone, you know, that they shouldn't lobby and do other things. All I'm saying is that if I create a very powerful piece of work, it will create the forces I need to bring in everything I need to make that film. But if I allow myself to, think I'm not getting in because I come from a working class background, I'm lost. Don't want anybody to ever put me in as a working class writer to get funding. That's not what I am. You know, that's just isn't what I am. I'm just telling stories, and I'm trying to find a kernel of truth. And if I can do that, it genuinely does create this powerful force that will draw everything in. People will be compelled to want to work with you, but it'd be very difficult for you to do it, because to sit on the truth, to find the truth and sit on the truth and stay on the truth long is very, very painful, because even your own family won't want to hear the truth. My family certainly didn't want to hear the truth about my brother, even though I knew I was cleaning. You know, people don't want to hear the truth, but you have to be prepared to tell it. And if you do, there will be people that will be irresistibly drawn to you. So I would just say, you know, wouldn't go for any of those things. I would just concentrate on the work, make the work beautiful.